All right, so we're holding it on Samacheya Midbays. I guess it may be a little less than two-thirds down. It's by the two dots. Um, and just to pick up the thread a little bit, the Gemara goes back and forth about different issues of ribbis, but comes out with one response, which we're going to see repeatedly again and again and again, because the Gemara asks in many cases, so who's the halacha like? You know, we learn the sugya, we say, who's the halacha like? So, but instead of telling us who the halacha is like, the Gemara continuously tells us who it's not like. And that's very interesting because we have that again last week, we have it again this week. And repeatedly, the Gemara says that in all these cases of ribbis, it's not like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda makes an exception that when there is a option to, and we learned this before already, but wherever there is an option to either exercise an option for a sell, a buy, whatever it is, then if that option would produce ribbis, it's not ribbis because of the option. So Rabbi Yehuda, he's very medactic on this, and he's very consistent that, of course, ribbis is a big answer, but when you have an option to either exercise or not exercise, then it's not ribbis, even if you exercise it. So even if you exercise it, it looks like ribbis. It's not according to Rabbi Yehuda because it didn't have to come out that way. That's called sad echad b'ribbis. There's only one side of ribbis because you don't have it universal. It's only if you exercise the option. So that's a carve out that Rabbi Yehuda makes, and the Gemara consistently tells us that in every case, again today, that the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, but it doesn't say who the halacha is like. He doesn't bring down an Amora or someone to whom he attributes the halacha. But he says it's not like Rabbi Yehuda. So we're going to see that again in a few minutes when we go into the next.
Rabbi, two things. One, could you tilt your screen? I guess tilt your screen. There you go. No, it's a little too far. Up, back the other way. There, perfect.
Okay.
And the second thing is Michael is here now, so I don't know if he has Mr. Barros or your site.
I'm sorry to interrupt the learning, but thank you, Menashe. Chavanomi Basto Rachana.
Chavanomi Basto Rachana.
Shalom Avraham ben Kela Gittel.
Shalom Avraham ben Kela Gittel.
Avigal Rishona Basora Rachel.
Avigal Rishona Basora Rachel.
Chavapro Bas Chayasora.
Chavapro Bas Chayasora.
Chayasora Bas Rose.
Chayasora Bas Rose.
Gila Shoshana Bas Libichana.
Gila Shoshana Bas Libichana.
And Marissa Bas Tobi.
Marissa Bas Tobi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to pick up from the two dots. As I said, almost two-thirds down, a little bit less. So this now we're going to approach a different issue. Again, we've been talking about first straight ribbis, then all kind of nuances on ribbis as to whether or not if you do this, then does it expose you to ribbis? If you get the benefit, like for instance in rentals and all these other things. So we have a variety of different approaches to what might look like ribbis. And again, even if it isn't ribbis or it's machzek ribbis, if it appears to be ribbis, we want to stay away from it. And none of these are really ribbis katsutza midaraisa. This is not ribbis from the Torah. It's mostly cases of ribbis midrabanan, which of course are serious, but we don't hold the same kind of a strict approach as we would with ribbis deraisa. In other words, in ribbis deraisa, you have to refund, and ribbis derabanan, in many cases, you don't have to refund. So, but nevertheless, it's an isser, so we want to expose it. So says the Gemara, mashkin lo bayis or mashkin lo basada. I lent you $100, and you gave me a mashkin. A mashkin is a sort of collateral, and so the collateral you gave me was either a house or a sadeh or a field, right? And clearly the house and the field are worth much more than the loan, but you didn't have anything exact, so you said, here's my house should be the mashkin. The house could be many times the amount of the loan, but that's, whatever it is. V'omalo. And so the malveh said, the lender said to the lover, the borrower, The machram. So he's telling him like this: I'm lending you the money. You're giving me the mashkin. But if you decide to sell this house or this field, lo tinkram elo li, then you have to sell it only to me, and he makes up a price, and the price is below the value of the house. So if I lent you $1,000 and you pledged your house, the house was $5,000, and I said to you, you know what? Okay, I'm happy to lend it, but if you ever want to sell it, I'm first in line to buy it, and I'm going to buy it for $4,000. So he's already dictated the price, which is lower than the value. Then says the Gemara, Osir, that's forbidden because that's ribis. Because at that point, he's already indicating, even though there is no ribis in the time that he made the loan, because he made the loan straight without any attachment. He only took the house as a mashkin, but he said that because he made a condition that you're going to sell it to me at this price, which is a reduced price, and that would be ribis, then says the Gemara, osir. Then it's already osir because you've already triggered what could be ribis, even though it isn't ribis today, but you've already established a program in this loan for ribis, and then so the Gemara says you can't do that. But on the other hand, if he said sell it to me for the 5,000, which it's worth the 5,000, then mutter, then it's permitted. So clearly we see from here that in this situation, you don't have to have the ribis actually triggered, because he may never sell it. He may not sell the house, but if he sells the house, then the price will be a reduced price, which will then be to the benefit of the malveh, and that's ribis. So we forbid it, and we said this last week that we're makbid sometimes to not allow a deal because of the potential of what might happen if the deal becomes actualized, and that's the situation here. If the deal becomes actualized, then it's ribis. Now, without saying so, Rabbi Yehuda would argue. Rabbi Yehuda said it's not ribis. Why? Because we just said that Rabbi Yehuda argues, and he takes the position that if you have a tzad echad, one possibility where it won't be ribis, what's the possibility? I don't sell it to you. In other words,
Or the price goes down,
what's that?
or the value goes down.
Or the value goes down. Of course, if the value goes down, but we don't know that today. So
Right.
if we're forbidding it today, we're going on today's value. You're right at the time of the sale, but we're not looking at it what it might be. We're looking at what it actually is. But we said before you came, I think, Jay, that Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going to see this again, takes the position that if there is an option, and that option would not produce, so anytime there is an option which has to be triggered by, say, by something actually happening, Rabbi Yehuda takes the position there's no ribis, because the fact that it might happen or might not takes it out of ribis. You have to have a certainty, according to Rabbi Yehuda, of ribis. If you don't have
Rabbi-
a certainty, then just the possibility of ribis is not ribis. So in this particular case, Rabbi Yehuda would say it's not ribis, because even though he made a deal with him that he's going to buy it for below the market price, but he may never sell it. And if he doesn't sell it and never triggers ribis, according to Yehuda, that's enough to wipe out ribis entirely.
Rabbi, could you clarify the facts of this case? Is the agreement to sell
Michael,
it?
can you speak a little louder? A little louder.
I'm sorry. Can you clarify the facts of this case? Because I'm trying to understand. So
Okay.
if you sell it to me for this price,
Which is
not
below the
if-
market price.
What?
You're going to sell to me for this price, which is below market.
Well, at the time that it's secured, it might be the market price. So I can understand that, but it would be fine. I just want to clarify. It would be fine if he said, you need to sell it to me at what the market price is when you sell it. That would be okay.
That would be okay, correct.
Thank you.
So what about the market price? Suppose he agrees to sell it below market price.
No,
Is
if he sells it below market price, that's ribis, because he's already built in the fact that he's going to make a profit when he sells it,
$1,000.
even though that hasn't happened yet. So the Gemara says that's ribbis.
Well, why else would he sell something if he weren't going to make a profit?
No, because look, he gave the house as collateral. He liked the house and he wanted the house. So, if he pays fair market value for the house, everything's okay. And again, you're not supposed to take ribbis. So when he lends him the $1,000, you don't lend it for interest. But if he says to him, I'm not taking interest from you, but if you sell, you must sell to me for this price, and that price is today below market, that's ribbis. Because he's going to benefit from the loan, not today dollars and cents, but down the road. And that's what, so ribbit, in other words, the Kiddush is, of course, the ribbit doesn't have to happen immediately. It can happen down the road. And the Gemara immediately says, B'shaveyed, but if he says, I'm going to sell it to you for whatever the value of the house is, I'm not going to discount it, then that's okay, because then he's paying market, and there's no one can say that's ribbis because he lent him 1,000. He's going to pay him back the 1,000, and he's going to buy the house at 5,000, which is what it's worth. That's a perfectly fine scenario. It's only when he says you're going to sell it to me for 4,000. Now, Jay says, what about if at the time of the sale it's 4,000? Fine. So then, but the deal never gets off the ground because at the time of the transaction it was 5. So you see, this is an interesting thing because at the end of the day, it may wind up being 4,000 if the market is soft and it goes down 1,000. And the chayra, there wouldn't be ribbis. But because you made up at the time of the transaction when it was worth 5, and you said, I want to pay 4, that triggers ribbis, so you can't make the deal.
It's only potential ribbis.
Right.
No money has
potential
exchanged.
ribbis. The
There's no
appearance
money
of ribbis,
exchange.
it's the appearance of ribbis because the deal's going to say,
Right.
I'm buying the house for 4,000.
It's an
Now, what
appearance.
happens in reality if the house is worth 4,000? That's later. But at the time of the deal, it appeared to be ribbis, right?
So-
Because at the time of the deal, he was getting a discount for the house.
But it's so theoretical. I mean, there's no money exchange, there's no Kenyan, nothing has happened. It's just a piece of paper that can't go into effect right now.
Correct. So the Gemara wants to tell you that's a chumrah in ribbis that you can't even do that. You're right.
Don't play
Everything-
around with it. Don't play
Don't
around
mess
with
around with it. Don't even go there, right? I gave you
Yeah.
the example last week. Is sometimes you take a flight and they cancel or they delay the flight. Why? It's perfectly sunny weather here, but you can't land. So if I can't land, I can't take off. So in other words, I can't take off on this deal because when I land, I'm going to have ribbits. Now, the truth of the matter is that, of course, if it goes down in price, then you pay the lesser price because that would be a fair negotiation a year from now, whenever it happens. But you can't, l'mafreya, at the beginning, say you're going to discount it to me at the time I make you the loan. So that whole package together makes it look like ribbits.
But this is another case of words matter.
Words matter.
Even though there's no transaction.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. So you have to be very careful in how you do it. So that is so the Gemara gives us that chiddush, right? That's the case. Now, so that's the brisa. So as I said in the beginning, the Gemara is going to ask Man Tana, B'damam halalu asa. Who is the Tana? Who, in other words, this is a machlokes here. There's this discussion among the Royim, and they say, okay, fine. Where did we get this from? How do we know? Is there a Tana? Because remember, everything emanated from the Tanoim. They established the Mishnahs and the Brises, and then the Amoraim built on it. So if the Amoraim are going to have this discussion, they have to go back and look what Mishnah or Brisa is going to that is going to tell us that you can't do it. So what's the answer? Rav Huna b'rei Rabbi Yeshua, the Lok Rabbi Yehuda doesn't tell us who the halacha is like. He's not establishing who the Tana is, but he's saying who the Tana is not. And we said at the very beginning that that's sort of very unusual because normally, if we want to find out who the proper authority is, so then usually it says, oh, It's Rav Papa, Rav Asi, whoever it happens to be. But here he's not telling us who it is. He's saying it's not Rabbi Yehuda. Why? And this is what we said. The Rabbi Yehuda, because if we follow the halacha like Rabbi Yehuda, or Omer, who says sad achas beribis mutter, which is what we said before. What does it mean, sad achas? If you have an option in a deal, and one of the sides of the option would produce ribis and then the other wouldn't, you can't say it's ribis, even if you agree on the portion of the deal that is ribis. It's not ribis because there was an option not to. So this is a big chiddush what was the option here? We said the option was because the lender said to the borrower, he says, if you're going to sell it to me. But the if means only if he sells. If he doesn't sell, then there's never ribis. So Rabbi Yehuda's mechadesh, because of that option, even if he sells for what appears to be ribis, it's not ribis. That's Rabbi Yehuda's chiddush, is that you can only have ribis when there's a certainty, not when there is a doubt as to whether, if he says, and we had this also, you're going to sell this house to me in 3 years, and I'm going to pay you $4,000. Straight out. No option. That would be ribis, because you established the price and the date, and the transaction has to happen. So the fact that it didn't happen today doesn't make it not ribis. Now, Jay, in your scenario, if at the time the actual deal goes down, the price dropped to the price that he agreed to pay, that wouldn't take it out of ribis because the ribis was already established at the outset of the deal. When they made the deal, that already became ribis.
But that ribis
evaporates. In that scenario, a deal has to happen. In this scenario, it's an option. If you sell, you'll sell it to me for 4,000. But if you don't sell, then there's no ribis. So you can't attribute ribis to a situation that may never happen. That's Rabbi Yehuda's chiddush, that sad achas beribis mutter, that if there's two options and one side is ribis, one is not, and there's an uncertainty as to which side is going to actually happen, then we say there's no ribis. Okay, so now we have, that's the scenario that we pose, and then we give Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Again, we still don't know who the Manda Omer of the Brisa, but it's not Rabbi Yehuda. That we know for sure. Okay. Now, a slightly different scenario. Again, we're positing a number of different scenarios that might or might not be ribis, and the Gemara is going to comment on. Mochalo bias. Okay, so the case that we had just before is mashkin lo bias. He gave him collateral of a house or a field. Now, mochalo bias. He sold him the house or he sold him the field. V'oma lo. What is the circumstance? The kishiyu limos hachzirim li. So the buyer says to the seller, "I'm selling you this house for $5,000."
It's the same scenario.
No problem.
This is a separate
But
scenario.
you have to agree. Sorry?
This is a separate scenario.
Yeah, different scenario. Again, we're gonna
Not
have a number of
connected.
different scenarios to see whether or not ribis applies or doesn't apply.
But it's
So
not
in the case of
connected.
the mashkin, we said that if you gave him in the case of the option, it's ribis, and the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says that can't be ribis. So some Manda Omer says that is ribis. Again, we don't know who yet, but okay. Now we have a different situation. I sold you my house, Jay, and I sold it to you for fair market. There's no issue. But you say to me, the kishiyu limos, when I can raise $5,000, hachzirim li. The condition is that you're going to sell it back to me, or you return it to me. Chazir means you'll return it to me. So again, that triggers a condition. I don't have the money, but if I have the money, then you have to sell it back to me. Says the Gemara, Asr, it's forbidden, because for the same reason, is that in the interim, what's going to happen in the interim? Who's going to have the payers? So if I sell it to you, you're going to have the payers, and you legitimately have the payers. But if you sell it back to me, so interestingly enough, that the reason why it's usher, because this is a little bit of a chiddush as well. If I sell you something and I condition it on my buying it back, then it's not a sale. It's a loan. It's a sale if I never buy it back. But if I buy it back, you've lent me the money, and now I repay you. If you've lent me the money, you can't eat the payers on a loan. That's ribis. So you see here, it's a real chiddush, because if I don't buy it back, no problem. You own it, it's yours, whatever. But since I conditioned it on my buying it back, says the Gemara, the chiddush is that sale becomes a loan. It could be a loan for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, and you're going to eat the payers. But if I get it back, if I repay the loan and you've eaten the payers, that's classic ribis. Now you've had ribis on that loan. So the Gemara,
Rabbi, just clarify that when you say buy it back, it means at the price of the loan, not at the market price.
Yes, at the price of the loan. Yeah, I'll pay you 5,000, and it's fine, 5,000, but I don't have the money. So when I raise the money and I want to buy it back, I'll give you back $5,000. In other words, the deal itself will be a kosher deal because no one is going to benefit on the monetary side. Where will the benefit be? On the payers.
All right. So here's the thing, though. So I agree in general with Sadeh, but does that also work with bias? I mean, it says malcho bias, malcho bosa. Bias.
But he has use of the house.
Well, I was going to say, so then it's really on the use of the house. It's not just, whereas on the Sadeh, the use of the Sadeh itself shows in the form of produce. And the use of the house, it's almost like it's really then that by getting it rent free for the 6 months in between, that's as if he had interest in that amount.
Airbnb, and he'll make money on it, and all that money will become ribis.
Right.
So in other words, that's the chiddush here. It's okay. The case is the case, but the chiddush is that when he makes that condition, that sale becomes a loan. If it was a sale, we wouldn't have a problem. I sell it to you, you sell it to me. While you own it, it's yours. While I own it, it's mine. But if you're going to transfer the state of the deal from a sale to a loan, that becomes a problem.
Well, in addition, there's also the issue of the market price. If the value of this house or field changes over time, which we're used to in this marketplace, but it varies depending on how long it is and where it is and so on. Sometimes it could go down. Then that itself would be an implied rate, because if he's presumably with this deal here, he's buying it back at the same price. Whereas if I simply sell it and then buy it back later separately, then it's whatever the market price is at the time.
That's correct. But they already agreed up front that the numbers wouldn't move. In other words, it's just that I don't have money now and I need money, so I'm willing to sell you my house. And you're willing to buy it. So says the Gemara, also that's forbidden for the same reason, because it will turn out to be possibly ribis, not 100%. It'll turn out to be ribis. Now, okay, so
if this thing goes back and forth, both the lender and the borrower could end up in a ribis situation, including the lender could end up. Because we're trying to figure out which side are we looking at this deal from the borrower's side or from the lender's side? And it
Yeah, but
turns out,
ribis can occur, you're right, Jay, but ribis can occur on either side because
that's what I'm saying,
if
yeah.
someone gets a benefit from the deal, regardless of whether it's the seller or the buyer or the lender or the borrower, then it's ribis. So, in this particular case, and of course, we said
It
that
could go
ribis,
either way in this case.
what's that?
It sounds like it can go either way in this
can go either
particular
way.
scenario.
Right.
Rabbi, let's just shift the case slightly so I can understand
Hello?
the position of the borrower to
Hello?
Jay's point. So I can,
Yeah, can you hear me?
Jonathan,
Yeah,
you need
I
to
can hear
mute
now.
yourself.
No, we hear you,
Okay.
Jonathan.
I'm muted.
So Rabbi, if I went into the transaction, I lend it, and I agree to sell it back at market price. So that's not a problem. But in the interim, I sublet that property.
Right.
I'm the borrower, and I sublet that property for more money. So I make more than the value of the loan during the
Right.
interim period.
Right.
Is that considered ribis on the
Yes.
borrower?
It's considered, well, it's ribis from the lender, but ribis for one is ribis for all. In other words, once there's ribis, everybody involved in the ribis is an isser. The question is who triggers it? The seller or the buyer or the lender or the borrower. That question we can address, but once there is a situation where ribis applies, it doesn't matter how it started. Everybody is in the mix, and everybody, it does wrong.
So I'm just trying to clarify. So if I rent the property to live from someone for a price, and then I sublet it at a higher price without getting permission from the owner of the house who's renting it, is that ribis?
Okay, but so what's the beginning? The beginning is that I made you a loan. You gave me the house,
Right.
right? You gave me the house. You're back to
Essentially
the
rent free.
hold on. You're back to the first situation of
I'm
collapse.
back to the first situation, right? I'm trying to figure out, can the borrower trigger ribis by abusing the privilege because he's using the house, he's getting the loan,
He
the
lives in
money
the
from the
house.
loan. Huh?
He lives in the house and he
He
rents
lives in
out
the
one of
house,
the rooms.
right?
He rents out one of the rooms.
Right, and he rents out one of the rooms. So the deal is you get, so he's making money on the first deal without the lender's knowledge.
Yeah. To the chayra, that's not ribis. In other
Why
words,
not?
why? Because when I borrow, okay, so in other words, the house was a collateral,
Right.
and you gave me the money.
But
Now,
there was a loan involved to start before the house became.
yeah, that's what I said.
collateral.
There has to be a loan involved. There has to be a
Right.
loan
Yes,
involved,
yes.
and then you get the house. Now, so the Gemara is saying that depending on what the conditions of the transaction are, it's ribis. If you, in the previous Gemara, we said if you established a lesser price, it's ribis. If you said, no, you'll pay me back the value of the house,
Price.
nothing more.
Yeah.
Right?
But in the meantime, he uses the lawnmower to cut his grass. I mean, that's the same basic scenario.
Right.
If you make the field the collateral and there's payros, we know what that sort of looks like. But if he borrows a car, he borrows a lawnmower.
Of course, you're going to use it. That's why you borrowed it. Right? In other words,
The mashkin, he gave the lender his lawnmower as collateral. So the
right.
question is, when you have collateral of different types, can you create a ribis situation if you then do something with the collateral?
You
Borrower.
can't.
I mean, the lender It's a question on him whether he can use the mashkin that's there as collateral.
So the Gemara said that if the deal between in the loan portion was straight 1,000 for 1,000 or whatever the number, then the fact that you used it doesn't matter because you gave him a mashkin.
Yeah.
You gave him a mashkin. That's okay. You can use the mashkin, but as long as the four corners of the deal, meaning the loan itself, was fair, then you can't have ribbis. You can't have ribbis. When can you have ribbis? Is if the loan itself had an imbalance. What was the imbalance? I'm going to pay you less than fair market value. That's the imbalance. The imbalance
Pay you less because you can use my lawnmower in the meantime. That creates ribbis.
In and of itself, when it was given as a mashkin, it's not a problem. It's the point of the mashkin, is that it's collateral, and the collateral is there. If it's a field, or if it's a house, or it's a piece of equipment, I mean, of course, you can live in it. Now, Michael, your question was, if I live it and I sublet one of the roofs to somebody else,
Right.
Again, if the loan itself wasn't problematic, then there's no ribbis that flows from that, even if I sublet it to somebody else and I make some money, because the loan was fair and square. The loan was $1,000 for $1,000. What happens on the outside of that isn't ribbis. That's why the Gemara says that if it was shaveyan, if it was dollar for dollar, mutter, then you're allowed to make the deal. Because even if I ate the payers, or even if I used the house or rented the house, it doesn't impact on the actual loan, which was a fair loan, fair, honest loan without ribbis.
So it's considered a separate deal. I'm sorry. So it's considered a separate deal. The sublet is not part of the loan transaction.
Correct. It's use of the collateral which you're allowed to use. How you use it, that's your business. It's not my business.
Whenever you take collateral, are you saying that the collateral can be used by the lender?
Yes.
Always.
Yeah. That's what collateral is. Collateral is, I mean, you have a house, you have a field, there's produce growing. What? You're supposed to let it just, rot on the field? I mean, in any situation where we had discussion about produce, we never talked about don't touch it, don't use it, because, again, you don't want it to waste. You don't want it to waste. So, but if the deal is not ribbis, then what flows from it is not ribbis. Now, in this situation that we just said, what do we say? That if I sold you the house, or I sold you the field, and I said to you, you know what, I may want to buy this back. So when I buy it back, then you're going to give it back to me. So once again, there's a contingency here. So we say, so the Gemara says that in the case of the sale, asur. Why is it asur? And again, Rabbi Yehuda would argue on this, right? Because Rabbi Yehuda says, anytime you have a contingency, there's no ribbis. You can't have ribbis in a contingency, even if the portion that you're exercising is the ribbis portion. Doesn't matter. Since you could have gone the other way, there is no ribbis.
Rabbi, okay. We talked about cases where the collateral was worth significantly more than the loan. And so if there's unlimited use of the collateral, you could have some significant problems about the loss that comes about because of damage.
So, okay, so you're saying if the collateral was more than the loan, so that might trigger ribbis. Is that what you're saying?
That's a possibility, because we talked about cases where the collateral was significantly worth more than the loan itself.
Okay, so in any situation where collateral is more than the loan, again, so I want to stress that if the terms of the loan aren't illegal, there's no ribis, then what flows from the collateral isn't ribis, because the deal was structured on, I give you 1,000, you give me 1,000. As long as there's no manipulating, like in the case of the Gemara, that if you sell it to me, I'm going to buy it for below market, which means ribis. As long as there's nothing like that, then sure, you use the collateral and do what you have to do with it. And then when it comes to repaying, you're going to repay. And there's no ribis that flows from that, because the underlying deal and the terms were not ribis-like terms. Once you make ribis-like terms, that impact, even if the loan was fair and square, 1,000 for 1,000, but the terms of the loan suggested ribis, that can't be. So in other words, Mexican ribis, it has a wide spread, and you have to be very careful that what you're doing doesn't appear to be ribis, because again, especially when there's a collateral, the collateral is meant to be used. You don't just let it sit there. So, but that in and of itself is not ribis if there's no inherent ribis in the deal. In this situation, where I sold you a house or a field, and I'm the seller, and I say to you, look, that one second. Okay. Mochalo bias, mochalo sadeh. So, okay, so if the seller says to the buyer, the Shiur limos, hachzirim li,
Well, it says
okay,
here then,
so in other words, I'm buying the house for $1,000. You have the house, I paid you $1,000. The seller is saying, if it comes to pass that I have the money to buy back the property that I sold you,
you have to
you have to
return
sell
it.
it back to me.
You have to return it, yeah.
Right. Says the Gemara, also. That's forbidden, because for all intents and purposes, we said he's making a loan that's considered to be a loan. It transfers from a sale to a loan, and during the period of the loan, the person's using the house, and that's ribis. So it's the chap that it changes the status of the property from a sale to a loan, and therefore on a loan you're not allowed to use. You're not allowed to have the benefit of the It's not collateral. It's an actual loan, and the house for that loan shouldn't be used. If it's outright collateral, that's a different story. But there's no collateral here. We're saying that he sold them the house, and he made a condition that he'll buy it back. That transfers the sale into a loan. And in that case, you can't do anything with the house. You got to leave it. The house has to be left. The field has to be left, because if you're going to benefit from the loan, that will be ribis. You see, that's a little bit of a different chap now.
Yeah.
Because the ribis will arise. The ribis will arise because I made the condition that I can buy it back. In other words, if I have the money, you'll sell it back to me. Says the Gemara, it's not a sale anymore, it's a loan. And then it's like any other loan of $1,000. We have this Gemara again and again. You can't, there's a whole shaila about what you do with the peiros, or in this case, the house or the peiros. That becomes a problem. Therefore, you can't do it. Now, let's reverse the scenario. The Shiur lecha mos achzirim lecha. that you sold me the house for $1,000 because you needed the money. But the buyer says to the seller, if you fall into the money and you have $1,000, I'll sell it back to you. Right? It's the flip side of it, where the buyer's going to be the good guy, not the seller says to the buyer, I want my house back. The buyer says to the seller, I know you have to sell me this house because you need money. I know you're short of cash. But I'm going to tell you that if it comes to pass that you raise this $1,000, then I'll return the house to you. The house or the field, whatever it is. So under that scenario, says the Gemara, mutter, that it's permitted. Now, the Gemara doesn't explain here. We're going to have to wait. But so look at the scenario. I mean, we don't yet know the reason why. But look at the scenario. When the seller wants it back, it becomes a loan, and therefore the fruit of that loan is ribbis. But if the buyer says, I'll sell it back to you, and then the buyer uses it in the meantime, it's not ribbis. Right?
It's interesting because normally we say that both the lender and the borrower are both liable in ribbis when a transaction takes place. And yet here we're saying which person it is determines whether
one side has ribbis. It doesn't matter what the other side does. You can't give or take ribbis.
Right.
Right.
And yet here we're saying that just a slight change, even though it looks, we get back to what it looks like the same transaction. It's treated differently.
Right. So, but we don't yet know the underlying reason, because the Gemara doesn't tell us here. Rashi explains it, like, come on. In other words, we're going to have to wait to understand why, if you flip the script, then it's not ribbis if the buyer tells if the buyer tells the seller, I will give it back to you. In other words, that doesn't trigger a loan. The only reason why we said it was ribbis in the other way around is because that sale became a loan, and therefore in a loan you can't use the benefit of the house or the produce. But here, the Gemara is not saying the sale became a loan. So we have to understand that. Why is it not the same set of circumstance trigger the same result? In other words, the sale wasn't a sale, it was really a loan. And from a loan, you can't benefit. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the case. And we're going to have to understand. Okay, so we'll hold off on that. But then the Gemara comes, the same kasha we had before. Mein Tana, who is this like? I mean, what Tana is saying that this is the scenario? Again, it doesn't give us an answer. Rabbi Yeshua, below Rabbi Yehuda, the same thing we said before. We know for certain that we don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda, because Ha'omer tzad echad b'ribbis mutter. Because Rabbi Yehuda has the universal plow that when you have a contingency, and part of the contingency is ribbis, and the other part is not ribbis, then no matter what you choose, even if you choose the ribbis side, it's not ribbis. Why? Because you had an option of not having ribbis. So again, Rabbi Yehuda's chiddush is an amazing chiddush. I would have thought, okay, it's not ribbis if you choose not ribbis. But once you choose ribbis, the ribbis option, why should you not have a ribbis? So that's the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda, that this option takes it out of the whole parsha of ribbis, and therefore, even if it's a straight transaction that looks like ribbis, it's not. Right? That's what happened here. That's kind of the scenario. I lost the picture. I don't know why. Okay, here we go. All right. So the Gemara tells us again, it's not like Rabbi Yehuda, and we don't yet understand why, if the buyer tells the seller, I'll sell it back to you, then it's not ribbis. Okay, so that's the situation currently. Take the Gemara, the obvious question. Maishno Reisha, Maishno Seifa. What's the difference if the seller is the one who's saying it Well, the buyer's the one who's saying it. In the case where the seller says it's ribbis. In the case where the buyer says it, I'll sell it back to you, it's not ribbis. My shno, why is one different than the other? So, good question. On my Rava, so again, sometimes the answer, leaves a little bit to be desired. Again, this is the Gemara. We say, Sefer the Amalei Medate. He didn't make a condition with him. The Chayra, according to this, it really is the same. Whether the buyer does it or the seller says it, if it's ribbis, it triggers ribbis. Why is it not ribbis when the buyer is the one who says it to the seller, I'll sell it back to you, is because he's kind of mollifying him, right? Midate. In other words, he's giving him sort of not an out, but he's sort of telling him, don't worry that depending on what happens, I'll sell it back to you. So the Gemara interprets this not as a specific condition that I'll sell it back to you, which would trigger ribbis according to this Gemara, and therefore there would be no difference between the Reisha and the Sefer. Because just like in the Reisha where the seller said it, it's ribbis, in the Sefer where the buyer says it's also ribbis. Why is it not ribbis? Because the buyer didn't make a pronouncement, I'll sell it back to you. He said, let's see what happens. If he's saying, well, let's see what happens, that's not a deal. That's not a conditional deal, and therefore it would amount to, I bought it from you, end of story. At a later date, I'll sell it back to you. So the whole issue of the sale becoming a loan is wiped away. The only reason why we said when the seller says it that it's ribbis is because from a sale it became a loan, and therefore you can't have benefit from the loan. But in this particular case, because he didn't say specifically, I will sell it back to you, which the Gemara is now saying would be ribbis, it would be ribbis. But why is it not? Because he didn't say that to him. He didn't say, I'll sell it back to you. He says, medate, I'll think about it, and maybe I'll sell it back to you. If maybe I'll sell it back to you, then it's two sales. I sold to you, you have the full benefit of it, do whatever you want, and then you'll sell it back to me. There's no break that would suggest that the sale became a loan. So that's the chap here. That's what Rava is trying to understand the Brisa, because otherwise it's a stira. Why in the Reisha do we say it is ribbis, but when the seller says it, and when the buyer says it, it's not ribbis. It's the same case. So why is it not ribbis? That's the chiddush of the Gemara, is that there was never a pronouncement of a absolute sale, because if there was, that would be ribbis.
So, Rabbi, in the first case, when he didn't say, I'll sell it back to you, he said, let's see what happens.
No,
sell it back to you.
In the Sefer, he said, let's see what happens.
What about in the Reisha?
No, if in the Reisha he would say the same thing, then you're right. In other words, saying that maybe I'll do it doesn't transfer a sale into a loan. So in the Reisha, we're saying that he pronounced in specific terms, I'm going to buy it back.
But Rabbi, if he ultimately concludes and does sell it back at the original value, it becomes ribbis at that point, does it not?
Not in the Sefer, because in the Sefer, if I sell to you, end of story, and then you come back and sell to me, those are two sales, and there's no ribbis. I sold to you, you do what you want with the field. You sold it back to me, I do what I want with the field. It's only because a sale becomes a loan that it makes it ribbis.
But it was conditional, and it says if this doesn't work out, I may sell it back to you. That is contemplating at that point in time that it could be ribbis, even though it's not necessarily.
And since it could be ribbis, we're not allowed to make the deal.
but that's why you shouldn't be able to make the deal, even on the, how do you view that as two different transactions? Because it was linked in the first place.
Okay, so I hear your question. So we have to, in other words, language matters. Language matters. If I sell you something, I sell you a field, and I say to you in no uncertain terms, I'm short of money. When I get the money, you are going to sell this back to me. That's the deal. You agree. I will sell it back to you. Okay? Now, the question is that ribis or not? Says the Gemara that when you actually make the deal and pronounce it that way, the sale became a loan. Because you said in no uncertain terms, you're going to sell it back to me, that triggers, says the Gemara, a loan until I buy it back. Now, again, we'll see from the Gemara, how do you, if I never buy it back, it's no problem. But since, and that's Rabbi Yehuda, but since at the outset, I already made a condition that I'm going to buy it back, which means I didn't really sell it to you. It was only a loan, because by definition, stating that I'm going to buy it back means it's not really a sale. It's a temporary sale, i.e. a loan. That's how the Gemara interprets that pronouncement. In the Seifa, says Rava, he didn't use that verbiage. He didn't say with certainty, I'm going to return it to you, which would be the same as the ratio. What did he say? He said, more or less, yeah, don't worry about it. When the time comes, yeah, maybe you can buy it back. In other words, it was not a specific deal. It was more of an amorphous discussion. Yeah, maybe you'll buy it back. We'll see, all kinds of things. So the seller felt better because he sees an out where he can get the property back, which is really what he wants. But the Gemara
Rabbi,
says,
if at the so the agreement though is at that time, maybe I'll sell it back to you. Implicit is at the price it was then.
it doesn't matter what the price is, Michael. What matters is that he didn't trigger a loan. The key here is that a sale becomes a loan when I make a condition that I can buy it back. That's the rule. So why is it not the rule when the borrower says the same thing to the seller, and he says, when you have money, you can buy it back? If he said that, it would be a loan. But Rava says he didn't say that. What he said was, let's see, don't worry about it, And so the seller now feels better because the buyer has given him at least the hope that he will sell it back to him. Says the Gemara, that means there was a sale, and if he sells it back to him is another sale, because it wasn't contingent on him returning it. It was an option that the buyer had. So when the buyer has an option, a sale is not converted into a loan. It remains a sale, and there's no ribis. I sold it to you. You own it. Do what you want with it. Eat the fruit, live in it, rent it out for money. But when you come back to me and you want to resell it to me, then I'll buy it. But in the meantime, there was nothing in between one sale and another sale that would be problematic. It's only problematic when you make a specific condition that you will sell it back to me. Then the Gemara says that's just a veil. That's just a veil for a loan in the verbiage of a sale, but it's really a loan, and therefore that triggers ribis. So, Michael, language matters. It's how he said it, and you're right. If in the case of the seller, in the ratio, if it was also kind of maybe I'll buy it back. In other words, there was this iffy situation, then you wouldn't have a loan. It would be an outright sale and another outright sale. Two sales don't make ribis, right? My to you and you to me sales, there is no ribis, even if in the interim we use the property, we do whatever we want with it. So that's the chiddush here. So Rava is saying that that's what the Gemara meant. Now, if the Gemara didn't mean that and meant specifically, I'll sell it back to you, then we're back to square one. That's not a real sale, it's a loan, and therefore ribis applies. So again, you have to be very careful. This is another one of those nuanced situations where you have to be careful how you couch the deal as to whether or not you're opening the door to ribis. So you have to be very careful when you present the deal. This is the deal, and that's why it has to be reviewed carefully when you're making a deal with another Jew. Is that there shouldn't be this appearance of ribis because of the way you're presenting the deal. That's the chiddush here.
So if somebody uses the house as a collateral,
Yeah.
and okay, he bought $1,000, whatever, for a year, and the borrower improves the house. Then when he goes back to the owner at the end of the year, the owner now has an improved house. Is there not some ribis situation here?
Okay, so, but what was the deal at the outset? I lend you $1,000.
And then I'm giving you the
You're
house as
giving me the
collateral.
house as a collateral.
Right.
Okay.
And
Was there any, hold on, was there any condition about a
no
buyback? No.
conditions.
No. So
If somebody improves the collateral,
that's
does
a
it go
problem.
back as ribis?
Yeah, that's a problem, Jay. That's a problem. Because then the improvement of the house is ribis.
So when you use field as a collateral and you take the payrolls so they shouldn't be rotten, you're
Well, those are the
improving.
scenarios no, we had those Gemaras before, where according to one Mandama, you shouldn't do it. According to another Mandama, you give it to a third party, let the third party hold it for later, right? In other words, we had scenarios before where that exact situation arose. And we said that if you got to be careful when you're playing with fire. So you can't. So the question is, who gets the fruit? Who gets the payers? And that was the whole.
So who prevents the field from being damaged by collecting the fruit? Otherwise, you get a messed up field with rotten apples all over the floor.
Right.
Well, if he just cleans it up. So
Well,
again, the question is, if
Yes.
in
If he
any
cleans it up and
mashke situation, there
But
can
if he
be
cleans it up, he's not
situations.
improving the property, right? He's just keeping the property status quo.
Okay, but he's sort of required to do that. At least it's expected that he would maintain the field.
Yeah. I think.
But it gets back to he's also expected that if he has the field at that time, that he would eat or sell the fruit too. It's also expected.
Right, but this is all fine and good if there isn't a contingency or a trigger that it has to go back. Then it becomes a problem. What are you giving him back? Are you giving him back more than what you got, or are you giving him back the same? Now, the chayra, if you're giving him back the field the way it was, it's kind of the same. The problem is that in the interim there was a benefit. The fruit was a benefit. So what do you do with it? That's what the Gemara was wrestling with. And I think that the best answer is that you give it to a third party or you sell it and put the money in escrow. And depending on what happens later, one side will get it or the other side will get it. So again, if you're very careful on ribis, then that's how you have to apply. That's exactly why we have all these Gemaras, is because there's a subtlety here. It's not ribis the way we understand ribis. I gave you 10% more on the loan. There's all kind of cheshbonos that you make, and then the question is it ribis? Is it not ribis? What are the circumstances? What did you say? What did you not say? That's how subtle ribis becomes, is because what appears to be ribis, if you said it a certain way, is not ribis. That's it. And by the way, that's the basis for the heter iska. it's how you couch the terms of a deal. I lend you money and I couch the terms of a deal in a certain way, and you pay me back more than what I lent you. It's not ribbis, because that's what the heter iska is. It gives us that opportunity. So again, words matter, and how you approach it is very, very important. So I think that, again, we're learning lessons here that ribbis is just straightforward ribbis the way we understand it. There are a lot of nuances to it. So we have to understand that. Okay. So let's see. If we go to the next Gemara, we're opening up a whole new situation here with a Maimer. I'd rather hold off because that's going to become more of an issue.
So I would have another question.
Yeah.
Did Art Scroll ever put out a sefer on ribbis?
You mean on heter iska?
Not the heter iska.
Did Art Scroll ever put a sefer on ribbis? I really don't know.
It seems like a great topic for some.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
To write a good total textbook on ribbis.
Yeah, because then there would be a lot of scenarios that would be presented. Yeah. That's a very interesting question. I don't know, maybe they do, but in today's world, by doing this heter iska, you almost wipe out scenarios of ribbis because you're establishing a fee, let's call it, and a fee is permitted. So again, I can't answer on every specific case if the heter iska will certainly it applies to many cases. I have to think about whether or not there are scenarios where heter iska would not apply because you can't write one. So, but in the typical scenario that we deal with today, about lending money, mortgages, what do the Israeli banks do? I mean, the Israeli banks are lending money to the Jewish people, right? And they're collecting interest. How do they collect interest? How can they collect interest?
So Jay, the answer to your
in the course of the loan, there is a document that is the heter iska, which becomes part of the transaction, and therefore it takes it out of the realm of a loan into the transaction of a business deal for which I'm entitled to be paid. I'm entitled to be paid for the business that I do. So that's kind of the way we have to look at it. So the Gemara is now going to go in and tell us other examples, but then it's going to become more complicated. So I think we should hold off on that until next week. But again, what we've seen today is two main things. First of all, again and again, we see Rabbi Yehuda l'shitaso that sad echad beribis is mutter. In other words, if there's an option, one scenario is ribbis, one is not, it's mutter. That's classic, and it's across the board for Rabbi Yehuda. Now, as to whether, okay, so that's not, so there's no ribbis. But according to the Manda Amar, who again is unnamed, that it is ribbis, we see different language. If your language is specific, then that gives rise to ribbis. If your language is not specific, but more of a sort of a reference, then there's no ribbis. And why? The distinction is that when you make that specific reference, the sale becomes a loan. A sale never induces ribbis. Let's get this clear. From a sale, you never have ribbis. But if a sale becomes a loan, that is the problem. So when you make a contingency that allows you to retrieve the property, then that gives rise to the potential that the sale becomes a loan, and therefore it's ribbis. But as Rava said, but if I didn't make the deal specific, I sort of generally suggested that you can buy it back, maybe yes, maybe no. The purpose of that was so that the seller should feel good that he has the option to buy it back. But it wasn't a definitive agreement. And if it's not a definitive agreement, then it's like two separate sales. I sold it to you. You can eat it. You want to sell it back to me. That's fine. But there isn't a loan that is triggered between the two sales. And that's the ikar here. So again, we're going to pick that up next week. We'll see exactly another situation that presents this, and then a whole other discussion.